you don't say no to something, by default, you say kind of no to something else. So if you're always doing something, there's something else you're missing out on. If you've got an important presentation at lunchtime or mid-afternoon, then maybe think about going out an hour before, a couple of hours before, and getting a little bit out of breath and timing your caffeine intake and treating it like, this is what I like to do. I like to treat those kind of corporate events as a kind of sporting performance. It's still a sport where the performance of the car is such a big component that's where the millions and millions of dollars and pounds are spent. And sometimes it's forgotten that you need someone to drive it. When you talk about like training, and then if you've got a good kind of 5-10 year training block behind you and then you get injured, well, actually you can cope with it pretty well. And the same can be said with the mind as well. If you've spent 5-10 years with a psychologist, the tools you've got to adapt to traumatic situations or even just normal life situations, I think is like, you're much more prepared.
All right, Dan, we're live on the podcast. So first of all, thanks a lot to David from Basics Gym for letting us put the couch in the middle of the gym and do the podcast here. Second, thank you for accepting my invitation. We've barely met so far. We've got kind of going in and out of the gym, and we'll explain kind of the context of how we met afterwards. But maybe for those who don't know you yet, give us a brief intro of who you are and what you do.
Sure, no, great to be here. Yeah, we met through one of my clients, a young motorsport driver using the gym. So that's how we've been bumping into each other.
Yep.
So my background is as a strength and conditioning coach, and currently based in Switzerland. Been here since 2016. Moved out here to work with Romain Grosjean, a Formula One driver.
When was that?
That was in 2016,
okay.
And worked with him for 3 and a bit years, and then worked with a young driver, Yuki Tsunoda, who's now in Formula One, was Formula 3 at the time. And then after 4 years, had enough of the travel, being away all the time from friends, family, and things like that. And now based in Switzerland, working more in the corporate sector for Hints of Performance, and a little bit through kind of my own self-employed channels. And then my background in sport is kind of endurance sport mainly. Love all endurance sport. Did quite a bit of triathlon and Ironman from a youngish age. And then more recently running marathons and cycling for fun on the weekends. So
yeah. So what does a typical day look like for you right now?
Yeah, currently it's a mix between I do quite a lot of remote coaching. And that's really blown up the last couple of years with the pandemic. But it's great because you can access people all over the world. So, I mean, I have a surgeon in Brisbane. I have a trader in New York. He's now moved to Dallas. Another plastic surgeon in the UK, consultants from Germany, and people from all kind of walks of life, as well as amateur athletes as well. So that's really nice because since working kind of with 1 or 2 people when I moved out here, I can now kind of access a lot of people. So that's one side. So I might have a few remote meetings, and then I do some internal work with Hintsa, working on our kind of webinars and our coach education platforms that we're growing. So earlier this week, I had a webinar to 150 people for a kind of music business that I did, which is fun.
Nice.
Some of it, again, is remote. Some of it's on site. And then I'll see 1 or 2 kind of personal training clients as well, which I do privately, or people involved in sport like this young driver who uses the gym here. How we met.
So let's talk about remote coaching for a minute here. How do you organize those? Are they like Zoom calls that you do, or is it kind of distance programming?
Yeah,
or both.
It's a mixture. Yeah, mostly the stuff through Hintsa is Zoom calls.
Okay. So it's scheduled hours or time that you have with your clients.
Yeah. So we have the standard package would be 1 times 90 minutes, and then another 6 45 minutes kind of follow-ups.
Okay.
It's usually over 7 months. it replicates the methodology of HINSA
Yeah.
and their Circle of Better Life. So they have kind of 6 outer elements of their circle, which is kind of nutrition, sleep and recovery, physical activity, mental well-being, general health, and I'm missing one, biomechanics. And then the 7th one is the core, is someone's kind of identity, purpose, and control. Exactly, yeah. So using people's understanding about people's strengths, trying to use them to help achieve what they want to, and ultimately get more satisfaction out of life, and hopefully that and we believe has a positive effect on their performance, whether it's in sport or within business. So yeah, that's the kind of setup that usually lasts 7 months, but there's some that are shorter, there's some that are ongoing, and I've worked with some clients for almost 3 years doing that as well. So it all depends, what they want. Some people want that constant kind of maintenance, and others it's like you make an impact for a few months and they go and work on it, and then it's done. So
between those kind of calls, do you set up kind of a full-blown plan for them? Do they have a regular schedule of activities and maybe goals that they have to achieve in each one of those categories that you mentioned before?
Yeah, there's definitely. So we break it down into kind of sprints, and the first 90-minute session is a planning session.
Okay.
So you would look at what they want to achieve. We do a survey prior to that with them. There's a kind of self-assessment thing. There's HINSA have an app. So a lot of it is generated around the app as well. And it breaks it down into these different sprints. So if on the survey and their self-assessment, their lowest score is nutrition, then it kicks off with that, because that could be the fundamental kind of reason why they're not sleeping well, or why they're not reaching their goals in physical activity, or why their kind of mental energy is low. So it's a really nice, quite a simple structure, but it means people can work on just one thing at a time and just try and make some progress on nutrition, then move to sleep the next month, and just tick away at it like that, rather than kind of throwing everything at them. And that's usually how we get nothing done.
Which is usually the worst way you can do something, is try to change it all at the same time. So what kind of time commitment does that represent for one of your clients? You talked about, traders and surgeons. So those are probably pretty busy individuals. So, and they probably have a family as well. And so how do you help them integrate what you're trying to convey into their daily lives? Because you're not there. And so they kind of have to, they have your direction and your coaching, but they have to integrate it themselves. So what are some of the strategies that maybe some of the listeners can even take away out of what you do with those people?
That is probably generally the biggest challenge. Everyone has busy lives. There's a lot on, and different priorities, family, personal, kind of hobbies and things we want to pursue, and obviously the professional side as well. So a lot of it, from my point of view, comes back to kind of a mindset and a psychology as well, of really understanding your own expectations, your own limits, and starting with that first of all, because no matter how you plan and what you set up, if your expectations are so high, you're always going to push beyond your limit or feel like you're not reaching the mark. And so I think that's a big reason why we start with this big 90-minute kind of session, and trying to kind of break down some of those common pitfalls. And then after that, you can use I use some of the kind of fundamentals of periodization, and some of the things on quite a micro level. I'm quite keen on it as well, on people starting to look at their days and weeks and even longer on a more macro level as well. But I think it's particularly hard maybe in the business world, because it's a real kind of moving environment. But in sport as well, it's not exactly clean cut, and lots change. But at least on a micro level, knowing kind of when the optimum time for this person to go, simple stuff like to go to bed, to eat, to have breaks during the day, and really breaking down. If you can do things on a daily level, then I think you're setting the scene quite nicely for improving yourself kind of weekly and monthly after that. So we use classic kind of almost like school timetable type things to start looking at actually what's going on during the day, how much they're trying to do.
Is it one of the problems that you have to deal with, that they're doing too much all the time?
Yeah, I think, and some of it's internal pressures, like I said, the psychology. Some of it is just external, and they're just always being pushed in competitive environments like that.
How do you deal with the internal drive to do too much? And that's it's a very selfish question, because I, working for myself, I always feel like if I'm not doing something, I'm losing ground. And so and I've definitely learned, I'd say in the last year, to cherish time off and to take time off and to make time to do nothing, because I really do feel the difference when I do. And when I don't, I feel tired, I'm more sore, I'm less focused. So how do you help people deal with that internal pressure of thinking you always have to do something if you want to, be on top, be the best, keep moving forward? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think there's several things there. I think kind of the learning to say no and turning things down, because if you don't say no to something, by default, you say kind of no to something else. So if you're always doing something, there's something else you're missing out on. So it's being able to kind of be selective, and be selective based on what is most important to you. Ultimately, trying not to be am I being busy just for busy's sake, and just trying to do as much as possible. I mean, is the way we judge success kind of volume based, or should it be more kind of impact and quality based? Is kind of another approach to that. So from that point of view, there's a few things to kind of reflect on as an individual, and then breaking down. We have different sectors of our life. So we have the professional side, where seeing a lot of clients, getting a lot done, is maybe rewarded financially. But then also, if we're spending a lot of time in that, how much time are we spending socially with our friends and family? How much time are we spending on ourselves, to have a break and to do the things we want to? So I think, again, looking at the balance there, it's not necessarily right, stop doing all that. It's actually like, if you can do all that and everyone's happy and you're happy, fine, that's brilliant. There's people who can manage that. So it's understanding kind of your own individual sort of pain point when you get to a point where you can't do anymore, but also, like, what else is really important to you? Like, there's obviously family there. There's usually something personal that we want to work on, whether it's our own fitness. So, and usually, like, when it starts to kind of overspill into those other areas and take up time, that's the limit. And then we can kind of work back from there and look at, what was that day like? Why didn't you feel satisfied? Oh, because I spent 14 hours working. I didn't spend any time with the people I love. So I think that's a nicer way of looking at it, because there's important things as well which need time as well.
So what would be the first step in changing those behaviors, reallocating time to, I guess, oneself? Is it the biggest priority usually for those clients that you work with, where they spend a lot of time on other things, on their work, and maybe not enough on themselves? How do you help them reallocate those hours, or find the balance that's right for them?
We use a kind of energy pyramid model, where break the three elements into kind of your personal, your social, and your professional, and ask people kind of how much time they put into each of it, how much energy it takes as well, and what energy they get back from it. So typically you get a sort of the big base at the bottom is the professional. They put in 95% of their energy, 95% of the time. And maybe, on a good day when it's really satisfying, they might kind of get 60% back. And then it might be 5% on themselves, 5% on the family in terms of time, maybe energy a bit more. And then what do they get back if they change that 5% to kind of 6%? You only have to kind of give yourself an extra 20 minutes a day to feel kind of an extra 10% back or something. It's all subjective. But, if we take, like, a lot of people where they have in their calendars just back-to-back meetings, and that's a common issue. If they can start to turn those meetings, their 60-minute meetings, into 50 minutes or 45 minutes, and just take 5 or 10 minutes in between each meeting to do whatever they want to do. It might be call a friend, it might be do some press ups, it might be do some breath work, it could be absolutely anything, but just to invest back in themselves a little bit. And those extra few minutes make such a big difference, because we know from assessing an individual based on trackers that we have used from First Beat, where we look at heart rate variability and stress score. That if they don't do that, the stress just accumulates throughout the day and can eat away into their night sleep as well, and can just overload them during the week, and then they are basically writing off the weekend trying to recover as well. So going back to kind of Monday morning when you've got 4 sessions, should it be 4 sessions before 12 o'clock, or could it be 4 sessions before 1 o'clock, and you've just buffered them out a little bit? And it comes back to periodization a little bit, and planning and knowing kind of the breaks that you need, and maybe just being a little bit I'd say more realistic, but maybe just a bit more kinder to yourself as well. I think life is a marathon, not a sprint.
That's well put. One thing that I've realized in recent months, just spending more time doing really easy, I'm on the bike and I'm most days doing nothing hard, and I'm kind of respecting my zone 2, and I'm really staying in that. And I felt a tremendous carryover to my work life, where I feel like it, and I'd never really kind of bridged that gap before, right? But now thinking about, and I have to say, I came back from an injury. I had a back injury for a long time, so I just didn't train for months. And so first of all, it was really hard for me to find time to train again, because I just filled up all that time that I used to take for myself to train. Now it's just reallocated to work. And so I had to find hours to take away and train again. But now doing that, I feel like that's carried over into me, feeling more resilient, being more, just have better endurance, not just for training, but for everything else as well. Is that something that you get back from the clients that you work with in terms of feedback? Do they feel that transfer, if we may use that term, from exercise to work life?
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds kind of I don't know, corny or cheesy, but like energy and your health is kind of the ultimate currency in a way, isn't it? And I mean, we've all been through periods where we've injured, or I had quite bad COVID 2 years ago. And that affected me kind of cardiovascularly, saw a heart specialist and everything like that. And actually, in the end, kind of 3 months of really, really easy sub 130 beats per minute exercise, I think did me the world of good. And I had my best season kind of in cycling after that. But you realize as well, when you are usually fairly fit and active, how much you take it for granted. And the fact that I would go for a walk with the dog, and after 20 minutes I'd kind of put my hands on my knees and like struggle to think, how am I going to get back to the house, because I'm completely knackered. So I think on that side of things, like that's like where you put your energy in, and when it's not there, you realize how kind of valuable it is. But just thinking, a client of mine was really inactive, actually wasn't overweight, but was just working kind of solidly, especially remote work when COVID first started. And he was kind of 8 o'clock in the morning till 8, 9 o'clock at night, like classic sort of hours, sometimes later. And the only thing we changed is just, and he had a treadmill at home, so he actually did it in his house as well, was just push him to do 10,000 steps a day, your classic 10,000. And the knock on that had to his outlook on life, his work, his sleep as well. He slept, like, that was the first thing. He was like, I'm sleeping so much better just from moving. And you see these small things, which again, you will listen to a podcast and people won't necessarily put the value on those smaller things, but go out and do it consistently, and like it really has an effect. It may not be that has a dramatic effect on you, but it might be changing and doing some of the zone 2 work. And I'm a bit like that, like doing kind of more than one interval session, maybe even 2 at a stretch, but one interval session a week starts to really affect kind of work and energy for the rest of the week as well. So understanding your limits and constantly changing with age as well. So
that does change. And back to your client who was inactive before, I guess those 10,000 steps are enough of a stimuli to actually see great progress. And that's I guess usually what you see is somebody who's never done it before, just by including a little bit of it, and it doesn't have to be a lot. I've seen, like you said, tremendous changes with quite minimal volumes per week, but having an impact on, like you said, all areas of life, sleep being one, and what an important one to be able to positively impact. So it's interesting that there is that carryover. What other maybe ideas or principles that you've learned? Obviously, you have worked with many professional athletes. So what other things can you take over or carry over from that realm of high level, high performance physical preparation into the corporate world, and with people that you don't train at all or start to be active? What carryover can you find there?
I think in terms of the physical activity, there's obviously dramatic effects you can have on the body with only a very, very short amount. So even kind of 7 minutes of exercise of kind of cardio aerobic exercise has been proven to improve your mood for up to like 24 hours. So, I mean, again, sounds like great, I feel a bit better, but for an elite athlete, and if you think about a Formula One driver, like as a coach, how do I want that driver to jump in the car? Like I want them to feel positive, assertive, confident. Like I want them to be in a good mood. So we would always include that within their warm-ups. The warm-ups would be 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It would be short, but enough to elicit a positive response in terms of kind of releasing kind of chemicals in the brain to make them feel a bit more positive, as well as you increase your breathing rate, you increase your oxygen saturation to the brain. That can improve cognitive skills, reaction times. So those sorts of things as well. The mental benefits we get from a short amount of exercise should be something that we prioritize, I believe, as well in the kind of corporate world. If we really do want to be as sharp as possible when we get to work, then a fast walk or a little bit of exercise for 10 minutes immediately before we start the day is absolute kind of ideal. It's your warm up to your kind of performance of the day in a way, and especially picking the times to do it. If you've got an important presentation at lunchtime or mid-afternoon, then maybe think about going out an hour before, a couple of hours before, and getting a little bit out of breath and timing your caffeine intake and treating it like, this is what I like to do. I like to treat those kind of corporate events as a kind of sporting performance. And then you can work back and try and get this person to kind of peak and feel good and be at their optimum kind of potential for that window. And you can play around with caffeine and nutrition and exercise to do that.
So a lot of the things that you would apply in a sporting competition context, you can apply it just the same to the business or corporate world, which makes total sense. Like you said, energy is the currency, and if you have more and if you function better, then you're likely to do better, whether it's in the car or on the field or in the office or in front of a crowd. And I like the idea of treating the business event as your competition.
Selfishly, it helps me as well because it gets me inspired and excited about maybe something in the office I wouldn't normally be excited about. So then that definitely helps kind of elicit a bit of motivation and inspiration for the client, hopefully as well. So
absolutely. I want to talk Formula One.
Okay.
So you've had a chance to work with some pro drivers. Do you call them pilots, drivers? What's the right term?
Yeah, drivers, but I think in French it's pilots.
Right. Pilote de Formula. It is in French. Okay, so I'll stick with drivers. Because I called them pilots once, and my wife was like, "Sean, they're not pilots; they're drivers."
Yeah.
So point taken. They're drivers.
Where's your wife?
You were right.
Where's your wife from?
She's from Vancouver, Canada.
Okay. A pilot would be
more like a fighter jet or something like that, which is pretty close. I guess
but it's not far off.
On land, it's kind of the closest thing that gets.
No, you're right. Yeah, with the G-forces and the reactions and everything like that.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I want to get to. I've obviously watched Drive to Survive the last few seasons. That got me back to watching Formula One. I used to watch Formula One like I guess most kids around here on the Sunday when there's nothing else to do, and you're just sitting on the couch on the Sunday at home, and you just watch the Grand Prix, right? And that's what I used to do, and then kind of lost it, came back to it through Netflix, and now I'm actually following the season. Care a little bit less about Drive to Survive now. I like the earlier seasons. I'm less fond of the drama that they're trying to portray. And I don't. Again, you're on the inside. I'm not, so I don't have all the details. But from what I've heard, it's quite dramatized, if I may say so.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, great show for those who haven't watched it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so watching Formula One, and I don't think we realize from the outside what they're going through in the car and how physically demanding just being in a motorsport, sport and in a racing setting, and especially in Formula One. So maybe as a starting point, can you give us an idea of what these athletes go through during a race, how demanding it is on the body, and then we can go into how you get them ready for that.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, the race, starting with the last part of the kind of 4-day build-up. I mean, they have to travel somewhere initially, kind of Tuesday, Wednesday, depending on the time zone. They then have a kind of media day on Thursday, which can be quite intense, quite overloading, lots to do, maybe lots of time on your feet. They'll catch up with their engineers a little bit. And then they have the practice day on the Friday, qualifying on Saturday, and the race on the Sunday is the classic format. So it's more of a kind of, again, like a 4-day event. And that's a good way of looking at it. And then being in good shape for the Sunday is in a way, your priority. Qualifying is very, very important as well, depending on the track. And yeah, to give you the kind of demands on a race, I mean, it's lasting between an hour and a half and 2 hours. And the average heart rate, when I was looking at it, was about the equivalent of kind of running like a flat out half marathon. So you're right at, you're getting close to your kind of threshold. And they're doing that while wearing thermal underwear, usually in a pretty hot environment, with an effect. And the reason why the heart rate is so high is because of the G forces on the body, and the heat as well, and the anticipation. So usually the highest heart rate is when they're sitting on the start line doing next to nothing.
Okay. Yeah.
Just waiting.
Yeah.
And I remember that was peaking for Roman at the time when we looked at things like that. It was over kind of 180. So to be honest, not a long way off office maximum. And then through the race, it goes up and down a little bit. And if there's a period of safety car or pit stop, then they have a chance to kind of recover a little bit. But yeah, I would say kind of a demanding half marathon, if you're running half marathons in the heat, is a good way to look at it. They lose between kind of 2 and 4 liters for a race distance. So again, quite high sweat rates as well. And then you got the physical demands, but there's a lot of massive mental stress. I mean, essentially, it is a life and death sport. And I mean, like as we saw with Roman a couple of years ago, he had a dramatic crash in Bahrain and was lucky to escape with it. And there usually is crashes like that unfortunately every few years. It's less and less, luckily. It used to be kind of much, much worse in the past. But since I was involved in Formula One, there was one death, young Antoine Hubert, as a French driver in Spa in 2018, I believe. And so again, it's always close on. There's always a reminder, because there's always been previous accidents in various tracks. So you have that stress. You also just have the stress of performance and being kind of that focus, that every little minute kind of detail and movement of your hands and application of the pedals makes a difference to your lap time, and that makes a difference to whether you progress in your career or not. So to do that under the physical demands, and then there's a lot of emotional stress as well because of all of that, and maybe it could be frustration with the car if you're not getting it set up right. Whatever it is, there's pressure from media, from internal, from the team. Social media is an absolute nightmare now on some things. But no, in terms of the access to kind of people have access to criticizing individuals, so there's it's very easy to get sucked into that as well. So being able to kind of compartmentalize that. And then they're normal individuals. They've got a family and 3 kids at home, and the kids are not misbehaving at school. So you've got all that to, and you're not there. So maybe you feel a bit guilty of not being there and helping out. So there's a lot, like, they are talented, privileged individuals who, when they get to the top, are getting paid really well. But at the same time, there's a lot on their plate as well. So yeah, it's a tough environment to be in for a long time.
If we look at strength and conditioning in general for, let's take a Formula One driver, what does it look like year round? How much general preparation, how much specific preparation, and then how do you periodize that around, the calendar and then the races?
Yeah, so yeah, it is massively it's massively heavily weighted to kind of over the winter training. It's only really the time where you can commit to kind of back-to-back weeks of quite heavy load. So the training during that time is quite arduous, because that's the only time you're going to make really any improvements. There's a break in the middle of summer as well, in the August, usually a 3-week break, where you can again add a bit more load. And then there's key times like after races. There's usually Monday, Tuesday is easier days, sometimes Wednesday as well. So you can always add in some heavier training on those days to keep to more as a kind of maintenance. So yeah, typically kind of season would end of November. They would have some time off, and then start maybe just before Christmas, or at least in the new year, and have January, February as the main sort of main general preparation phase. In terms of specifics, I think the specifics for them start when they start back in the car and in the simulator, because it's such a cognitively demanding sport. That's really where they're getting kind of the most specific prep, I would say.
Just like general, and then there's in the car.
Yeah. Well, there's not. I mean, actually nowadays there's better and better with the simulators that they have at home.
Okay.
So they can do more preparation like that, and especially when there were some long periods of time when they were not in the car over during COVID times, they were all buying home simulators and home rigs to practice. So that gives, and some of those are getting more and more kind of lifelike, so they can actually get some benefit from that. In terms of me structuring that, it's better the driver structured it, or some of the younger ones have driver coaches who are ex-drivers and stuff.
Okay. If we talk, the general prep, if you had to split it up between, weight training, easy conditioning, hard conditioning, and maybe a couple more elements, how does a week look, let's say in January when they're kind of full into their preparation? How is the week kind of split up for those guys?
Obviously always depends on the individual a little bit, and if they're kind of junior, senior, whatever it is, and what they need to do. And when I was working with Yuki in the beginning, we really had to put a heavy strength kind of block in for a while, because he was in Formula 3. There isn't power steering, and so it's a lot more physical. So actually, in a way, that element is easier in a Formula 1 car. You can drive with your fingertips rather than with your shoulders. So, but in general, I'd say like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for instance, might be your general strength and conditioning sessions, 1 to 2 hours in the gym. And then we might reserve Thursdays and Tuesdays and Thursdays for more aerobic conditioning. And then you would break it up a little bit. So definitely kind of the intervals would go on a Tuesday or Thursday. And we might do some specific timed intervals around sort of like VO2 max type intervals, whether it be on a track or on the bike or on a rower. Again, 1 to 2 minutes, sort of reflecting the time of like a quali lap, of a push lap. And typically, because of tire wear and stuff like that, they wouldn't usually do too many kind of back-to-back hard laps like that. Even in a race, it's not flat out because they're protecting the tires. More recently, and I haven't been involved in the last year or two so much, I think it's got kind of better and better in terms of they're able to push the tires a little bit more. But I know I was quite shocked when I first came into Formula 1 with Roman. He goes, no, the art is you've just got to protect it. You're driving at like 60-70% a lot of the race, and you have to be smart with when you're choosing to push and use and degrade the tires. Otherwise you'll get found out, and you have to do an extra pit stop or anything like that.
Because it does look like they're pushing.
I
mean, they are pushing, but it looks like they are always going for it. But it's interesting that there's this tire component that's such a big one.
And it's quite cool now to hear, like when you're hearing the engineers speak to them, and sometimes they say, right, now let's see the potential of the car. And so they've just been holding back a little bit. And then it's like, right, we'll give you everything. And also there's the risk that if they flick a few of the switches behind the scenes and give them full power, then that can affect the reliability of the car sometimes as well. They can push the engine too much, and Red Bull at the start of this year struggled a little bit with reliability. So there's a lot to play with as well, and yeah, some of it's in the hands of the engineers, some of it's in the hands of the driver.
Outside of racing the car, is there any good way to get ready for the G-forces that they have to face?
There's various things people have done with wearing kind of weighted helmets and doing. You can do work with weighted helmets. You can drive go-karts or regular cars with weighted helmets on. So you're kind of it's exaggerating.
Do they do that quite a bit?
Yeah, I've seen that done. Roman had a kind of 5 kilo weighted helmet, and we would do your normal side of gym work with it. So imagine doing kind of a side plank or a normal planks or sit-ups and stuff with a 5 kilo
load to the
exactly. We might do a kind of 10-15 minute set like that. And it's pretty hideous. I tried it for a couple of minutes because there's no oxygen there either. Like you're contained, and the physical stress on your neck doesn't make you feel particularly well either. So so that side of things, there's using neck harnesses and bands and things like that. And I took a lot from rugby and from seeing what rugby players and at the time Anthony Joshua was kind of really big on the scene in 2016, and he was posting a lot of videos around his neck training, and so I try and adapt some of those as well. So try and steal a bit from other sports, which was quite good fun to try that as well. And so yeah, there's quite a lot you can do specifically for the neck, and obviously in terms of resilience to the G-forces for the rest of the body, they are held into the car pretty tightly with the seat belts. So it's more posturally protecting them as well. There's a lot of impact up and down. I mean, especially this year, there seems to be loads of the porpoising. Yeah, it is insane. But even when they look smooth, they're still hitting curbs, and they're in a carbon seat, so there's the bum is on the floor. There's not a lot of protection there, and a lot of these guys are kind of spine are degenerating quite quickly. And part of Hintz's approach is, again, they have scans, we have doctors that look at that, and we try and protect that with the training we do as well. So obviously there's always a performance element to coaching them, but then there's our element of just well-being and making sure that they're not in pain when they're in the car or out of the car, and that they're also after 10 years of driving, that they can still walk and play with their kids as well. And I think that, again, should give them a lot of motivation for doing some of that work. Maybe some of the older ones rather than the younger ones, but so there's a few things to juggle, as there is in a lot of sport.
Might be a hard question because you've been involved and are still involved in this position, but how developed would you say strength and conditioning is in motorsports in general? And if there is any gap between, maybe I don't even know what to reference as a gold standard in terms of, athlete preparation for a given sport, but if there is a gap, what is missing between where it is now on a general level and where we need to take it to kind of get it to the next level?
When I first started in 2016, there was maybe, guessing, 6 or 7 coaches from Hintsa that were working in Formula One, and most of the drivers, not all of them, but most of the drivers were just starting to get kind of a performance coach each. But I would still say at that time, it wasn't necessary. It was just starting to be valued as a really important factor. And you've interviewed Pete McKnight, and the work that he's done within Hintsa with monitoring, with studying the effects of the loads on the body, and a lot of the things that he's done through Hintsa in Formula One has been really trying to push it on to more of a structured approach to strength and conditioning. I would still say, I think people are more aware of it now, but I think it's still a sport where the performance of the car is such a big component that's where the millions and millions of dollars and pounds are spent. And sometimes it's forgotten that you need someone to drive it. And you still see the difference between kind of fit drivers, young drivers, old drivers, drivers that kind of are in shape to do it and who aren't. And especially with some of the young drivers coming through, it's not that they are not fit, but they're not fit enough to kind of manage everything, like be comfortable to drive the car as well as have all the kind of emotional stress going on at the same time. So in my opinion, you need to be extremely fit so that when you're in the car, it's not an issue at all.
Yeah, you're fit beyond the demands of your sport, which
exactly.
is tough given what you have to deal with in the car. But that's always the idea, is like you prepare yourself for more so that when you're in the situation, it's just easier to deal with.
Yeah, and I think it's grown a lot. And again, I haven't been involved as much in the last year or two, but knowing some of the coaches who have been working in Formula One since 2016, and Rupert, who was coach of Carlos Sainz, he did a lot of he has been doing a hell of a lot of work with Carlos, with analysing through a bioharness the kind of breathing rates and the different loads on the body, and he's presented that to us at Hinset, and it's absolutely fascinating and really kind of cutting edge stuff. So I think a lot of it at the moment is maybe kind of been a lot of like data collection, and especially on the cognitive side, I still think there's a gap there for us to really understand exactly kind of what is the best approach for drivers, and it will be different depending on what they are good at and what they, if some need to work on the reaction times, others may need to work on their kind of resilience to making mistakes, and their consistency, and there are various things that might affect it, like we can go and play squash, and that's good for quickness of thinking and reaction times and stuff, but as always, how much does it kind of carry over into the sport? I mean, I think it's a lot based on how much belief the athlete has as well in it. If they're playing squash and they feel they get an advantage from it, then
they probably are.
Then they probably are. Yeah. And in general, I think for juniors as well, I think they do get a lot of benefit from doing that variety of things. So with Joshua, I work with, we do play squash a lot, and he does taekwondo, and he does strength and conditioning and CrossFit stuff. He does endurance work as well, and we get him in the lake and do kind of cold water stuff. So we try and keep it like varied to work on a lot of things, because I think when you're a youngster, especially if you've just been driving, you have quite a kind of narrow window of operating, and the more experiences, the more kind of resilience you have to forces and to various things going on. I think the more you can adapt, and it is a sport where you're driving different cars and there's different tracks and there's different conditions. You have to be adaptable. I think the best are the most adaptable, and again, probably the same in a lot of sports. But
I was going to say it kind of blends together with something that I've been thinking about more recently, is the importance of the general aspect of physical preparation, and how you want an athlete first, and then especially in the sport. If they only do the sport, they're going to be missing a whole lot of things that are probably easily accessible that would help them in their performance, but that they're just not touching because it's not my sport. But like you said, if they do a whole variety of things and they become great athletes, aware of their bodies, knowing how to control what's between their two ears, that's going to carry over no matter what their sport actually is.
100%. And I really think that's important for junior athletes. They are again, the development of the brain is still happening, and it won't finish until they're kind of in the 20s. So I think take advantage of it and throw a lot at them. And I've seen junior drivers who can't skip or can't catch balls, and you kind of, these are people who the hand-eye coordination, or at least their kind of fine motor skills, should be exceptional. You should be trying to juggle. You should be good at juggling, and you should be good at skipping and having the coordination to kind of move your hands and your feet, because that's what's happening in the car. You're having to kind of change the angle of the steering wheel and apply different pressures on your feet to get the right brake shape and everything like that. So the more we can do to assist in that, I think the better they are for it long term, certainly. So,
how involved are you in the psychological aspects of the development of the training, I guess, of the drivers, because they're, like I said, there is such a important component of focus, because you just can't, you can't look at the stands. You can't, you have to be, one thing that always comes back to mind when I think about Formula One is it Richard Hammond from Top Gear trying to drive the Renault, I think, in one of the old episodes, and he said the corner just comes too fast. He just couldn't deal with it. And I guess the drivers that you work with, they've been in cars for a long time, so it's less of a problem, but it's insanely fast is what I'm trying to get to. And again, you can't skip a beat. You have to be on it the whole time. So how does that does it get trained? How can you train it? Are you involved in that process?
Almost comes full circle to like one of the first things we spoke about is like, first of all, you've got to get your brain and your mind in optimal condition to produce those peak performances. And if you haven't slept well, if you haven't done a decent warm up, and you're not eating the right things, then like it doesn't matter what your mindset is, or what, like, in my opinion, how you think you're going to do or anything like that. I think you're never gonna achieve kind of as close to your potential as you can. Now, there are always outliers, and there are some people who may think I don't need to warm up, or it doesn't really matter, like I can potentially your Kimi Räikkönens of the world, who people have seen in the past out kind of partying and stuff like that. But actually, you know, I think they still have a routine when it comes to it, and they'll still be. I know his physiotherapist, and they'll still be warming up and doing training away from the track and stuff like that as well. So, so I think firstly, like, get the fundamentals right with a holistic, just well-being and those principles. And then after that, then you can dive into the specific. I'm not a psychologist. I've done a lot of work psychology with people in terms of kind of helping them think about things in the car and managing distractions and emotional control, and understanding kind of their purpose and the reason why they're doing something and what's important to them, and trying to block out negative thoughts and all those sorts of things. I think from that point of view, I mean, there's lots you can do in terms of kind of journaling before you get in the car, and practicing your self-talk and thinking about words that might help you when you're in that high pressure situation. And more recently with Josh, we've been really just focusing on, you know, forget about speed. You're like, we know you're quick enough. I've looked at him before he's got into the car with the reaction lights, and when he's at the track, like, he's a different level to when he's away from the track. Like, he's there, he's switched on. You don't have to worry about that. Just worry about being accurate. And that's maybe his challenge, and maybe younger driver challenge is something like that. So he would just use the word, I think he was using correct or accurate or something like that. For each corner, he was just like, just do the correct thing on each corner. Like, don't worry about, I need to go faster, I need to be the quickest. Like, just be correct, like technically accurate and correct. So from that side of things, like I think you can't not get involved in it in the psychology as well. And then I have spoken to psychologists and used psychologists in the past, and actually Roman was very obvious, very open with the media and everyone. He's used one before I started working with him, and was using the same one for the whole time I was with him. And we chatted about stuff, but he kind of had that ongoing in the background that he was happy with as well. So, and you know, I think everyone should now. Sports psychology is such a.
I was going to say, when I was younger, I would have said, "Oh, he's seeing a psychologist as a problem." And now I say, "Well, he's probably a smart man," because I've had the chance to work with one for some time, and it's hard to describe what it brings. But I feel like it does make a difference, and everybody that I've spoken to, I mean, since, whether it's in the realm of sports or not, see an advantage to having this kind of guidance, and somebody not telling you what to think. It's really just asking the right questions, or making yourself making you ask yourself the right questions.
Exactly. It's just a bit of a mirror,
and unlocking a little bit of some of the stuff that's up there.
And I think obviously there's the specialists in that realm play a really important role, especially in certain scenarios. And I think, you know, Roman having that psychologist up to his accident, he bounced back remarkably quickly after that. Like, and he was in started driving an IndyCar and started doing really well. And yeah, never really had any kind of moments in the car where he was where his performance suffered and he felt like he was kind of reliving past traumas. And you know, I think when you talk about like training, and then if you've got a good kind of 5-10 year training block behind you, and then you get injured, well, actually you can cope with it pretty well. And the same can be said with the mind as well. If you've spent 5-10 years with a psychologist, the tools you've got to adapt to traumatic situations or even just normal life situations, I think is like you're much more prepared. And so you're just improving your chances, aren't you? I mean, even if you feel it doesn't have a huge effect, you're just improving. You know, you're doing everything you can to kind of hit that, hit the nail on the head without you trying to use a pun about.
For the people watching on the other side of the screen, watching Formula One, how can we make out if the car is really good or if the driver is really good? Is there any way of telling them apart?
Don't ask me that. I'm still trying to work that out. They tell me the car's rubbish all the time. So I think
I guess it's hard to untangle them because they're.
You can, I think, always. I think look at the gap to the teammate.
Okay.
Is probably the biggest thing,
because the cars are usually going to be really close.
Yeah,
to each other.
It's not all like they should be. They're usually closer than other cars.
Yeah,
should be. Not always the case, and some cars are reportedly set up for certain drivers. Some people say the Red Bull car can be very, very difficult to drive because Max drives it in a way that he likes to be on the limit and he likes to slip and slide around, and other people have been in there to try and drive it. Just like I don't know how he drives this.
Okay,
but it's obviously really fast when he gets it right. Yeah. But for other people, they want a bit more downforce or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think you can look at that, and in most. That would give you a good story, I think.
Okay.
If one driver's really having a good week, then they should be on top of their teammate. You can look at the kind of record as well. Like if one teammate is always beating the other, and then 5 weeks down the line, kind of George Russell is ahead of Lewis Hamilton, he's starting to adapt, or he's starting to get closer. And so
he was saying it last year, I just need a faster car.
Yeah.
He's got it now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he's doing really, really well.
What is he, fourth?
Yeah, I think so, in the championship,
fourth?
something like that. He was second, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and then he's come down a bit. But so I think that's probably the most obvious. You can, I guess, you can visibly see it sometimes, and sometimes just because someone's making mistakes and crashing out, I think it's a lot of the time it's more of a reflection on the car than the driver. In my opinion, that those drivers, if you're getting into Formula One, 90% of them are exceptional drivers. There are a few who have a lot of financial backing, and it's easier to get in than others potentially. So maybe their development hasn't had to be as good. Yeah, whatever. That's what some people feel. And so you can look at that as well in terms of the car. If they're struggling with the car, then it's not always the driver. It could be the car is very difficult to handle. And I think the Mercedes at the start of this year was pretty much like that.
They were the drivers were definitely saying that they weren't happy with the car.
They
had no problem saying it.
Yeah, exactly. And even in testing, they're making quite a lot of mistakes, and like uncharacteristic for kind of Lewis and George, who are very, very consistent drivers, to kind of make mistakes. So if you imagine kind of it's not doing exactly what you want, and you're trying to push it to its limit, you want a car that's predictable.
As someone who's been involved at the highest level in the sport, what is the most impressive thing to you athletically in the sport of Formula One? An element that the athletes have to deal with, that they tolerate, that they're able to work through, to shine through.
I think, without sounding too general, but I think it's general resilience. Like, they're bouncing all over the world competing, and I've done it with them, and I've done it with them while trying to train for an Ironman at the time.
Yeah.
And I lasted about 2 or 3 years of doing that
Yeah.
before I had to start to change a few things, because I ended up in the doctor's surgery thinking things were wrong.
Yeah.
Something was, and I was essentially kind of getting close to kind of burning out. So for them to do that, to get the most out of themselves when they're in the car and produce a lot of them pretty consistent performances in qualifying in the race, with all the stresses and strains that go on through the travel, constant mistakes, because usually in practice, I mean, if you watch a couple of practice sessions, there's usually 5 or 6 like accidents. Some of them are dramatic crashes. A lot of them are just people losing the car, skidding, spinning, going wide. So the resilience to that all the time and producing a good performance at the end is pretty impressive. Because I feel I'm quite physically and mentally resilient, but I found it pretty tough doing it as a coach. And some of these guys are doing it for 10 plus years. So I think that aspect's quite impressive. And maybe just the pure competitiveness of a driver. They know when they put the helmet on, they jump in the car.
Yeah.
They know it's just them against the enemy.
How's their self-belief, and how important is it? I mean, what came to mind when you said that is MMA.
Yeah.
And you have some, love him or hate him figures like Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, they know they're the best.
Yeah.
Even if they maybe aren't, they have to know they're the best, because there's no other option. You can't even have a shred of a doubt that you're not.
Yep.
Do you see that in the drivers as well? Is there that component?
Yeah, I think if you ask all of them who are at the Formula One level, and even a lot in Formula 2 and below, like what do you want to achieve? I want to be Formula One world champion. And it's not, they're just saying it. Like they do believe, give me the right car and I will be Formula One world champion.
They believe they're the best driver, and given the right conditions, they will achieve.
Yeah, exactly. I think they just believe that they can compete with anyone out there. Obviously, they know there's other exceptional drivers there, but they believe they're on the same level. And I think, in a way, it's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing that cars are at different level, because you can always have that belief. If you're sitting in a Haas that we were in 2016, where it's obviously not as quick as a Mercedes or a Red Bull, and you're finishing 5th or 6th, which we did in the first couple of races, then that belief is just skyrocketing. It's like, give me Mercedes, I will finish this race first. Like it's actually, there's no question. So yeah, I think and again with George Russell, when he was in Williams, he was proving that a lot of the time, that he was getting better performance out of the car than I guess the engineers and people thought. So then that helps your self-belief. It's like, well, actually, yeah, if I can do this in a Williams, what can I do in a Mercedes? So, but again, they're also human. Like, and you have an accident. It comes back to resilience. I mean, they have an accident, and yes, self-belief might get knocked, but I've always been like amazed how they just get back in and just send it into the first corner again, kind of 100%, and go and post up a decent lap time. But it's interesting. I remember one story. I was sitting with Roman in Austria, and we'd done really well in qualifying. I think he qualified 4th or 5th, and we were sitting there on the track, and he was like, oh, I don't know what to do. And I was like, what? He was like, it was more, I don't know what to do, in terms of he had some decisions to make about how to play the race, how aggressively to go on the tires. They were talking about kind of, what sort of lap times to do and things like that. So it wasn't necessarily, I don't know what to do, but there's always quite a lot of options as well, I think, in a technical sport like that. So that's where the ultimate kind of team environment comes in. And if you have really strong engineers who know your performance and stuff as well, that can help a lot. Ultimately, he knew exactly what he was doing, because he finished 4th in that race. So so it was fine. But yeah, I think when they're in that car and the lights go off, they're all incredibly confident. So yeah.
What you talked about your own training. Ironman, amongst others.
Yeah.
So maybe for starters, tell us a little bit about what you've trained for over the years, what might be some of the highlights of your own sporting careers so far.
Yeah. I started playing football when I was younger, back in the UK a little bit. I ran at a kind of county level, cross country when I was pretty small as well, and I was kind of 7, 8 years old. And then I got into field hockey, which absolutely loved. Did that all through school, university. I played rugby, played cricket, enjoyed it as well. Played basketball, so played quite a few sports. Did a bit of horse riding, did a bit of gymnastics when I was younger, did a bit of sailing. In fact, lived on a boat for 3 years. My parents kind of took us out of school and traveled across the Atlantic and saw the Caribbean and America and different kind of cultures, which is incredible. It's definitely shaped kind of how I've grown up now. And then always enjoyed the kind of endurance side of sport. Was always pretty good on the hockey pitch in terms of having a decent engine, and that was made up for that when I was a bit smaller and weaker, until I hit puberty late in 16, and then it had a bit more strength, which was nice. And then I always wanted to join the Royal Marines and actually go kind of military elite rather than sporting elite, and try and get into the special forces, which my uncle did for a bit. And I was at university and I had a skiing accident, ironically part of the kind of officers training corps at university. 3 weeks of alpine skiing, which was awesome, with actual races at the end of it in the Army Championships, was incredible. So slalom, giant slalom, downhill with 2 meter 20 skis on. It was awesome. And I was lucky, like my parents took us skiing from the age of kind of 4 or 5, so I had a bit of a background. So I could get some top 20 places in the Army Championships. It was amazing. And it's university level, so you're having a good time on the side as well. But on a training accident, really slow speed, I kind of tried to force it into the first gate, and ski went straight on and I went right, and it ruptured my ACL. And didn't really think much of it. I didn't know what I'd done, and came back and played hockey on it and went for a shot, pushed off that leg, and it felt like somebody had stabbed me in the back of the leg, and it just ballooned. And so I had to go and have surgery on it, and was the first ever thing I'd done in terms of I don't know, I cut my knees open a few times as a kid, but not not a dramatic injury like that. So that was strange, because I was fine with it and quite enjoyed the process of weirdly of rehabilitation. And I did a module at university where I could research ACL rehab and learned a lot through that, doing the different exercises on myself and the different progressions, and loved it, and always have loved coaching either myself or other people to try and get the kind of maximum out of them. Went to sign the form to join the Marines, and the top of the medical form was ACL. I've still got an ACL. I was like, shit, no, I don't. So I was like, that like hit me pretty hard at the time. I wasn't upset or anything, but I was like, now what? Like, in a way, in time, there was a bit of relief, because it was like, that's what I wanted to do since I was like 14. And there was always the question, like my mum and my partner now, who's now my wife, was kind of a bit like, you sure you want to go and get shot at, essentially. But when you're growing up and you're seeing kind of 9/11, and you're seeing the buses explode in the UK and various kind of terrorist acts, it's a pretty kind of motivating factor to either giving some payback or doing your bit, really, like trying to actually make a difference. And so that's still, like, I still have a really high regard of the military, and I would have loved to maybe become a PT in the military or do some work within it. Never kind of worked out, but I just think those individuals who do that, I think the values that they have and they put on the line is incredible. So kind of started the rehab, swimming, then a bit of cycling, and then eventually back into running. So reading the old Men's Fitness magazine as a 19-year-old, and there was an off-road triathlon in Dorney Lake in the UK that I signed up for. Did okay, absolutely loved it. Started cycling a bit more, did my first half Ironman, a few months later. Like, cried at the end because I was broken, because I hadn't trained properly for it, and had no nutrition, anything like that. Did okay, I did it in 6 hours, but it was still like all right,
Yeah.
not anything exceptional. Then did some shorter distance triathlons and qualified for my age group, which was age group world championships, which was in Australia. I did my masters up in Edinburgh, and then I went out in strength and conditioning, which is the best year of education I've ever done. It's amazing. They really pushed you to do a lot of practical experience, and worked with kind of academy athletes in Scottish hockey at Murrayfield as well with the rugby guys, and that was immense. Like really kind of amazing what the access you'd have to athletes as a student still, and how close they were in Scotland. So after that, I was like, this is definitely what I want to do. I definitely want to coach at a high level and try and coach some elite athletes. Anyway, went to this is a long story, but I went to Australia, stayed out there for 6 or 7 months after the World Championships. Did okay, came kind of 11th in my age group, and then it was a sport I came to relatively late. So I was like, I'm improving very quickly. My running's really good. My cycling's okay. My swimming is pretty average. So I hooked up with the coach there and just immersed myself in the kind of full-time training schedule of the professionals there, and the classic approach maybe of some Australian coaches. Be careful what you say, but throw 6 eggs at the wall and see which one doesn't break. I definitely broke after that. Like I mean, I got a lot better, but it was a good education on kind of, you know, individual differences, and that I was trying to train at a very high volume, and I don't know how much detail you want, but like it affected my moods quite a lot. And yeah, when you're waking up in the middle of the night and wondering what this pool of liquid is down by your crotch, because essentially you've not woken up because you needed the toilet because you're so tired. It's a pretty obvious.
Do you feel you were overtrained, overreached?
Massively.
Yeah.
And I think it took me a few months when I got back to the UK to adapt to that. It was just a mixture of probably more intensity than volume every day.
I was gonna say, because volume can definitely get to you, but if it's regulated optimally, it's less likely to actually generate that much fatigue, unless you really you know, if you were doing 10 hours a week and then you jump to 30, that's probably going to be a problem. But otherwise, I was going to say there was probably a lot of intensity in there.
There was a lot of intensity, and also kind of not fully having the experience of understanding maybe kind of the best way to fuel myself. I hadn't learned when you're kind of 20, 21, you hadn't learned a lot about yourself. So it took 6 months to realize that eating yogurt in the morning was affecting me massively in terms of the kind of lactose intolerance or just sensitivity that it would have of interval sessions. So that was quite a painful experience of acid reflux and visits to the toilets on Bondi Beach while I was trying to do my 400-meter repeats along the pavement there. So lots of lessons of what not to do, but at the same time, like amazed how, I mean, I still learned about really good quality training. I was probably just trying to do too much of it together, learning kind of what sessions to do for certain things, and seeing other very talented athletes as well, and how they prepared for kind of professional events was really good. So came back off the back of that. Still did a few kind of professional events back in the UK. I did the London Triathlon, but I finished like 50th or something, and that was a big kind of eye opener that, you know, still a long way to go if you want to make this as a living, and mainly in the swim. And I'd seen a bit of improvement, but when you're trying to do draft legal races and you're in the back group and having to bike and run to just get in the top 20 or something, and there's no paycheck for someone outside of the top 10, so
still need a lot of hours in the week.
Exactly. And you know, I wasn't started living back at home, and I was like not really ready to just kind of live off my parents. Like I want to start to get an income, so applied for a bunch of jobs, like loads of jobs as you do in the sport industry, everything from like even one in table tennis as well. And actually, that was it. I think one of the only interviews I actually got in table tennis, where they said, "This is not for you. You're not gonna." Yeah, it was nice of them actually. I was like, well, I do want a job, but they were like, no, this is not going to be for you. You're not gonna stay very long. Like, you need to do something else. So I just started working self-employed, PTing, working with a couple of young athletes that I'd met at local gyms. A young British rally driver, or British touring car driver, called Jake Hill, who's now still driving at a very high level. I knew a friend from school and university who was a very good hockey player, field hockey player, and he had just been approached by Brazil to represent, because he was adopted actually from Brazil, grew up in the UK. Wanted to represent Great Britain, but in the end, he probably would have done it the next cycle, but he had the opportunity to represent Brazil and go to and help them qualify for the Rio Olympics, which is a pretty awesome journey. But at the time, their hockey setup was pretty pretty entry level in a way. They had coaches and stuff, but it didn't have much kind of preparation about what to do. They were just relying on the athletes having their own support. So I took hold of his strength and conditioning, and that was the first real kind of insight to proper elite, using my background in strength and conditioning and using on an elite athlete. And cool story, Stefan Bell Smith, his name is, but it's a cool story behind him is that they played the Great Britain in one of their group matches, and he scored the first goal. So they went 1-0 up from a short corner, absolutely buried it into the top corner. They ended up losing 14-1 or 15-1 or something. But still watch that video with kind of goosebumps. It's quite nice to kind of a friend and a client, and to see kind of, and again, actually learn a lot from him, because his level of belief and his mental game was and still is kind of out of this world with his approach. And it kind of reminded me that, it's just anyone can take that on if they want. Obviously, he became a very good and was a very good hockey player, but he had that approach to a lot of what he did as well. It's kind of quality, clarity of thinking, and sharpness. So spent 5 years in the UK, kind of growing personal training business. Got really busy. It was brilliant. Loads of awesome clients and fun clients, and from corporate and from sport as well. And was only really throwing. I don't know if they probably know this. Hints probably know this, and Pete might read it, but really only throwing CVs and covering letters out that were generically made, because I'd lost the sort of will to make the effort on that, and I was focusing it more on growing my own business and the clients I had, and so never really kind of got emotionally attached to any of that, but would keep a little eye on it, and would do it every now and again. Heard back from Hintsa, and they said, "Can you come for an interview?" I was like, "Sounds pretty cool," not knowing what the job is. They said potentially it's in motorsport. Obviously didn't think it would be Formula One. Left the interview, and they told me when I left what it was for, and I was like, oh, that's lit the same fire as I felt kind of wanting to join the military. So I remember texting or emailing Pete straight away afterwards, going, "You know what, I might have played it cool in the interview, but I do really, really want this." And I think maybe it partly helped that I wanted to do it, really wanted to do it as much as they kind of saw in the interview. And within like a month and a half, I was out here meeting Roman and starting with him in kind of January. Interview was in like November.
Which is a pretty it's a pretty quick turnaround. And probably a huge life shift for you too, with everything that came with it, the moving and adapting to a new sport, learning a new sport, all those things. Dan, in closing, what pieces of advice would you give to the viewers, the listeners, people that are most likely in sports that want to do well? What have you learned from all your years as an athlete, as a coach, at many different levels across many different disciplines? What are the main principles that you extract and try to apply with your clients so that everybody could most likely benefit from?
My sort of mottos are like enjoy and embrace the challenge, and it's as simple as that, because challenge yourself first and foremost, and put yourself in challenging situations. I think I personally find it exciting, and I think it's where you're going to learn about yourself and grow. commit to it. So don't just do it because everyone else is doing it. So actually embrace it. You do it. You're challenging yourself for a reason, and find a way of enjoying it. Which I think again, like, can sound simple, but if you've been in a marathon or you've been in an uncomfortable situation, you've been doing public speaking or something, like, find a way of finding some element of enjoyment. It doesn't have to be just raw fun and enjoyment. It can be the fact that you kind of give yourself a pat on the back for putting yourself in that situation. And that would be my motto. Like, definitely never lose the enjoyment, because for me, that's what life's about as well. So I think that's more come from my personal experiences than the coaching professionals.
Well, I guess, and I find myself thinking the same way. I'm not a professional athlete, far from it. But even just in my day job, my job as a coach, if I don't enjoy what I'm doing, there's a problem. I decided to put myself in that situation and do that job. And I need to make sure that every time that I do it, or at least the majority of the time, I take something away from it that's positive. And if it's only misery because I impose hard things on myself and then get out the other end and there's nothing to show for it, what was it all for? So I can probably relate for people that want to perform at a high level in sports. It needs to be the same thing. It's going to be hard. You're going to have to work hard, but you have to take something out of it. Otherwise, why for Niels van der Poel, it was the ice cream, right? It was like, ice cream's cheap. I like ice cream. So this is why, I'm going to keep doing my hours, because this is how I get through it. And I guess everybody needs to find their ice cream.
Exactly. It's 30 degrees here, so it's a good one to
Exactly. We should definitely go for ice cream later. Dan, where can people maybe find out more about you or get in touch with you, whether it's on social media or else?
I'm on Instagram. I think it's at Dan Simsey or something like that. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn as well.
I'll put the links in the show notes.
Cool. So reach out if you want to get in touch, or check out the Hintsa website as well, and probably got a profile on there also. So or if you look closely, you might see me on the Drive to Survive season 1, one of the episodes. So
I'll have to go back and watch it. I don't think it's got my
Instagram handle on it. Actually, I should have a word with Netflix about that.
You should. They should put it back in there. Well, either way, it was a lot of fun getting to know you, and thanks for coming on the podcast, doing the show. Thanks everybody for watching the episode. Like Dan said, go find him on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Get in touch with him. Tell him what you thought about the episode. If you have any questions, you can obviously reach out to him. Dan, thanks again, and I guess I'll see you around.
Cheers, mate. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, please take a few moments to leave a written review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you want to watch this episode again, you can find the full video recording on my YouTube channel. You'll also find hundreds of hours of free content, all my podcasts, my thoughts of the day, structured presentations, and more. So don't wait, go subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.